So I was just discussing with the people that participate in this panel now that if we kept it at this rhythm where I push you to be exactly on time when we start, tomorrow we would have a strike. I'm sure. Because, you know, this is the Mediterranean, so normally the third day you have a strike. You have to have a strike. Okay, so welcome back from lunch. I hope you had the possibility to freshen up a little bit, have lunch, relax a bit, because now we will be starting with the afternoon and last session. I mean, not the last, it's the last afternoon of the whole event, the third international conference on marine and maritime spatial planning. And this afternoon we have two sessions. Between the two there will be a coffee break. And right now we have session number 8, which I consider one of the most important, not that the others were not, which is on sustainable blue economy. On this session we have, again, a wonderful lineup of people. My co-moderator in this is Juan Ronco Zapatero from DG Mare. Juan, can you please join me up here? And you applaud as people are coming up. Thank you. Then we have Anne Türkmen from the Ecological Research Society from Turkey. Anne, please join me. And our speakers, we have 2 speakers that will connect online remotely. So our first remote speaker is Odan Lem from the FAO. Our second online speaker is Bente Pretlov from DNV from Norway. And then by physical presence, we have Nathalie Scheidegger, if I pronounce it right. Nathalie, please join me from the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality, Directorate for Strategy, Knowledge and Innovation, Netherlands. We have Marisa Lameiras de Silva from the Directorate General for Maritime Policy from Portugal. Welcome, Marisa. We have Jane Turple from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, Madagascar and Tanzania. So Jane, please join us. And Nurfatin Wahida Puspa from the Maritime Institute of Malaysia. Nurfatin, thank you so much. Please join us here. I don't think I need to explain to you why sustainable blue economy is important or why it is so much connected with MSP. A, because we all understand it, and B, because the speakers will do it better than I will. Let me just tell you that in this session, what we will try to explore with the speakers is the links between MSP and the sustainable development of the ocean economies. And with this, I would like to turn to Juan Ronco Zapatero from DG Mare. Juan, please take the helm.
Thank you very much, Spiros. Buenas tardes a todos. Voy a decir algunas palabras en español.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to speak in Spanish, at least for a bit, because we have to honor the cultural diversity that we have.
And I also might speak French a little bit, because I think it's a very important language in Europe and in the world. And I haven't heard a lot of French over these 2 days.
Parlo una mica de català, pero I wouldn't dare to go further than that. So, okay. So I start my timer now. Sorry for cheating about this. Okay, so the conclusions from the results from the forum. So let's see whether technology works. So there were 4 tables that discussed this on the basis of questions. And one question was about blue growth. Perhaps you remember that in the early 2012, the European Commission published a strategy on blue growth. This resulted in other institutions talking about blue growth, the FAO, even the World Bank, they have a pro-blue strategy. So it became a kind of fashionable subject, but not uncontroversial. So in the tables, in one table in particular, there was discussion about, do we really need blue growth, because this leads to consumption, to more consumption, more use of resources. Why don't we speak about degrowth? So this is also a very interesting concept, and in the academic literature you will find quite a lot of articles about degrowth, and in particular blue degrowth. So I think in the table there were so different views, and on growth, degrowth, I think we have we have to find a balance. So indeed, blue growth may need to increase consumption, but it's also something that perhaps can lead to more jobs, to more quality jobs. So we have people that live from the sea. So that's something that we need perhaps. But the shift is now towards what we call the sustainable blue economy. There was also talk about, in the context of the blue economy, stakeholder participation, the balance of power, I would say, between some of the actors. You may have actors that have quite a lot of resources available to participate in maritime and spatial planning, and who are also actors of the blue economy. But there are others that have less resources, that are less equipped to enter into this discussion about what could be the uses of the marine space. And one of the conclusions was that we need to empower perhaps these groups that are less better equipped to be fully or on an equal footing to participate in this discussion in the organization of how do we want to organize the marine space. Excuse me. There was also discussion about whether the blue economy or maritime spatial planning is there to protect the environment or to promote economic activities. Again, I think in the discussion I see there are very different views, but it's a matter of balance again. So we need to protect the marine environment because that's the basis for the blue economy. But at the same time, opportunities have to be seized to promote some of these activities and can be very sustainable and provide livelihoods for people. Finally, there was a bit of a discussion about, on the basis of a question again, on the role of public sector, private sector. Indeed, we have in the marine space, in most of the countries, coastal states, the marine space, the maritime domain is a public domain. This is very interesting because if you look on landwards, in many cases, this is a privately owned domain. So here the role of the public sector is very important, but sometimes it could be that the public sector fails. So there was a call here for the private sector to contribute to organizing MSP processes in as much as possible and to coordinate efforts with the public sector to achieve sustainable marine or maritime spatial plans. Okay, so with this, I close here my point on the results of the table. Sorry, of the maritime of the MSP forum, and then so I will then introduce the speakers. Okay, let me see again the technology delivers. Yes, we have our first speaker is Audun Lem from FIO. It's a familiar face to me because I have worked with Audun Lem, work with him in another context. But Audun, I think is remotely okay. Do we have his presentation?
No, I have a little talk. I don't have a presentation, so.
Okay, Audun. So
okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Juan, and very nice to see you again. Okay, I will present some key messages from FAO, and just to say it briefly. So certainly, growth is needed. If we talk about food security for a growing world population, of course, we need to also increase future food supply from the sea, from aquaculture, and from capture fisheries. But of course, the point is that this must be done sustainably. So let me share some facts with you. First of all, global fisheries and aquaculture production is at a record high, and the sector will play an increasingly important role in providing food and nutrition also in the future. The latest figures from FAO show an annual fisheries and aquaculture production of 214 million tons. And that is almost 180 million tons from of aquatic animals, fish and fisheries products, and 36 million tons of algae. Again, algae is also very important. Aquaculture has a great potential to nourish the world's growing population again, if we want to only stabilize the per capita production or supply and consumption of fish and fishery products, we have to grow together with a growing world population, of course. In 2020, global aquaculture reached 123 million tons with a total value of almost $300 billion. And out of these 123 million tons, aquatic animals, fish and similar species accounted for 88 million tons, and algae of 35 million tons. Algae, again, is incredibly important and has a very strong growth potential. I mentioned consumption. Consumption has grown from about 10 kilos per capita in the world in the 60s to around 20 kilos today. And this is mainly, but not only, mainly through aquaculture growth in the last couple of decades, and also intensified fishing in the 60s and 70s. But all the recent growth comes from aquaculture. And we have problems at the same time, of course. Fishery resources continue to decline due to overfishing. We have problems of pollution, inadequate and inefficient fisheries management in many areas, but also the number of landings from biologically sustainable stocks is on the rise. And this may seem a contradiction, but I'll tell you more the numbers as they are. So the fraction of fishery stocks within biologically sustainable levels has fallen a little bit from 67 to 65%, meaning that 2/3 of all marine stocks are at the right level. However, when you look only at the number of stocks, this number is declining. However, if you look at the volume coming from those sustainably managed stocks, we find that 83% of the landings were from biologically sustainable stocks. And this shows that when you have important commercial marine resources stocks, they also tend to be better managed because they have a value, and therefore effective fisheries management is coming into place. And this is a very good message. It means that if you implement effective fisheries management, stocks bounce back, and you manage to also increase the volumes long term from those stocks. However, we also have a problem of the fishing fleet. The size of the fishing fleet, it is still too large. It's being reduced, but it still continues to be too large. If we look at the millions of people that are supported by fisheries, we know that about 60 million people are directly employed in the primary sector. But if we include also indirect and the value chains as such, we find that 600 million people in the world really depend on fisheries indirectly and directly for their livelihoods. Therefore, aquatic food systems are a powerful solution with a great potential. In FAO, we have developed a strategy called Blue Transformation, in which we want to combine the challenges of food security and environmental sustainability. We are committed to the vision of Blue Transformation, trying to enhance the role of aquatic food systems in feeding the world's population by providing a framework of legal instruments, of policy measures, and also technical frameworks to allow this growth and innovation to take place. However, this blue transformation requires a commitment from both the public and the private sector if we are to achieve not only the United Nations 2030 agenda and SDG 14 and all the others, but also all the other commitments that we have for fisheries and aquaculture. So blue transformation seeks to promote sustainable aquaculture, expansion and intensification of aquaculture, more effective management of fisheries, and also upgrading of the value chains. In order to do that, we need proactive public and private partnerships. We need to reduce food losses and waste, and we have to enhance equitable access to markets. And furthermore, inclusion of aquatic foods in national food security and nutrition strategies is fundamental, together with initiatives to improve consumer awareness of their benefits, and is with a goal to increase availability and improve access to world consumers. Thank you very much. Back to you, Juan.
Thank you, Auden. Thanks for sticking more or less to the timing. So now our next speaker, let's see here. Yeah, it's Bent Predlove from DNV Norway, the Norske Veritas, I think these are the initials for. So she's also speaking remotely, I understand. Okay, so Bente, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I've got a few slides that I would like to use for my intervention. And I'm very happy that the involvement of the private sector was actually mentioned quite early on in the introduction. To actually talk about and explore NSB and the blue economy, it is extremely important to understand the complexity of the blue economy. Could I have the first slide, please? To understand this complexity, it's extremely important to take a systemic look where we basically understand that's the slide I was hoping for, yes. So we need to basically understand the entire system, the interactions between the different sectors and the interactions between the sectors and ocean health. And when we take a systemic look, we actually realize that the entire system might have quite different properties to each individual part. So in our work, we basically explore the supply-demand relationships and the interactions between these different sectors to be able to say something about the future of the blue economy towards 2050. If you can please just click 5 times. We look at tourism, desalination, we look at ocean energy, we look at shipping, we look at fisheries, and we look at marine aquaculture. We mainly focus on not loose sort of policy ambitions, but the key trends. Now, what does this give us? Well, it says something about what trends might shape the blue economy in 2050. And we see 3 key trends. First of all, we see a geographic shifts towards Asia. And this comes with the decline in investments into oil and gas, which is a good thing, and a more diverse blue economy. So more investments made in desalination, offshore wind and aquaculture and so on. And with this, we get a shift towards Asia. We also see that the blue economy basically reflects all of the key industry transitions that we need for a sustainable blue economy. So the energy transition, as mentioned, with acceleration of offshore wind, the need for fresh water and actually a tripling in terms of capacity for desalination, the very importance of healthy and sustainable food from marine aquaculture, and then of course the maritime sector, which services all of these sectors. But all development comes with a cost. And what we would like to focus on is what we call the race for space. Next slide, please. So by actually taking this systemic look, we can go from taking just one look at the blue economy for 2020 to actually do a forecast of what this will mean for space in 2050. So the picture on the left here shows, the key activities in the North Sea as of today. Now, what we do is that we take our projections, we look at what that means for future demand for area, and we compare that with what is available area for the different purposes. And that is steered by a number of criteria, such as distance to shore, depth of water, and so on. And we then design what we call a spatial competition index. And then we can really start looking at what areas will be under significant pressure towards 2050 and where do we have the greatest risks. And when we go beyond a competition index of 1, we need to have coexistence. We need to share resources and costs, and we need to have much better collaboration, circular economy solutions, and so on. We actually also see that in certain sectors, we will see a migration of activities into other sea basins. So my main point here is that we need to combine, we need to take a systemic look, we need to combine the spatial look and the temporal look in order to have well-informed decisions about the blue economy towards the future. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Bente. Thanks for giving us some bonus in terms of time. I want to say two things. One is your first slide looks a bit complicated. It's about system dynamics. In the EU, we have financed a project called Coastal in the context of the Horizon 2020 research program, and it's about system dynamics applied to coastal regions, and MSP appears there prominently. So if you are curious, just Google Horizon 2020 Coastal, and you will see a lot of deliverables on this using system dynamics. The other thing is that I don't know whether Michelle did this on purpose, but we have 2 Norwegian speakers, even if Audun is based in Rome. So we go now south to the Netherlands. And now we have as a speaker Nathalie Scheidegger, I hope I pronounce this correctly, from the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. Nathalie, please.
Thank you. Also, thank you very much that I'm invited to give a presentation about how we approach a sustainable blue economy in the Netherlands. In my presentation, in my presentation, I would like to focus on why we use multiple use as a driver of the sustainable blue economy in the Netherlands, and how we have developed the maritime special plan in the Netherlands by using stakeholder engagement. And I also would like to focus on how we use sustainable blue economy multi-use within the wind parks. And finally, very short about the international cooperation with other countries, because we need each other. Innovation, blue innovation, sustainable blue innovation, we are all working on that, and that's why international cooperation is very important. First one, why multiple use? This one. From a maritime special planning perspective, there is an increase in pressure, and like Bente also mentioned, race for space on how to fit new sustainable economy like offshore energy into the common economies like shipping, sand, transport, telecom, cables, and so on. And here you can see the map of the common economies and marine areas, marine protected areas in the EEC of the Netherlands. So you can see it's already quite crowded. And on this map, we have included the new blue economies, like the offshore wind farms we are building at the moment, but also we will build in the future. So you can see on this map that it's getting much crowded, and we are planning, our ambition is to plan wind energy, and it will take about 25% of our EEC in the Netherlands. As probably 25% in 2050 will be offshore wind energy, multi-use is becoming more and more important, and also stakeholders' engagement to create a level playing field from the common economies and also the new enterprises. And that's why we have set up maritime special planning by talk with the different stakeholders, NGOs, research institutes, policy makers, but also entrepreneurs. And we have set a maritime special planning, and we had 3 principles on that. The balance between 3 transitions, the biodiversity, energy, and the food production. The second one is a safe a balanced and efficient human use of the North Sea within the carrying capacity of marine ecosystem, what is very important, and also separate what needs to be separated, combine what can be combined. As I told you, we have tried to include all the stakeholders. It's also based on the North Sea Agreement. Actually, it's a political North Sea Agreement. And in the maritime special planning, we also included a chapter on sustainable blue economy. That is aligned with our new approach of the sustainable blue economy of DG BAR. So we have tried to include sustainable blue economy in the new maritime special planning. As probably 25% will be offshore wind, we also focus on the possible sustainable blue economy synergies within wind farms, like combining, as you can see, you have the different sectors. We are trying to combine oyster farming with artificial reefs, or offshore winds with floating solar, or other combinations. So really seeking two different combinations, and always taking into account the ecological boundaries. So we really try to work together with the different initiatives. Therefore, we are also developing at the moment area passports within each wind farm. This one is the first wind farm, first area passport within the wind farm, so you can see the different possibilities. You can get a permit with regard to aquaculture, passive fishery, nature development, and other forms of sustainable energy like solar power or tidal, etc. At the moment, we have a lot of pilots, and what we would like to do is scaling up these innovations by working together with different stakeholders within our community of practice we have set up. And at the moment, we're also working on a blueprint for public-private Mari Park to scale up, and also to give the possibility and facilitate the industry to realize scale-up innovation within wind parks. Last one, the international cooperation, because I think I have the limit 5 minutes exceeded. As I said at the beginning, international collaboration is very important, because all the countries are doing very good work with research, also NGOs. So the collaboration on innovation and also scaling up innovations is important. That's why we have set up the European Maritime Special Planning with the North Sea and Baltic Seas. And we're also collaborating with other sea basins to exchange information about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathalie, for this national perspective. And well, the Netherlands are, I would say, a veteran, one of the most veteran countries in the EU on doing maritime special planning. Bear with me if I am sometimes Eurocentric. This may happen. So we travel south, more south, and then we go now to Portugal, and it's so I introduce Marisa Lameira da Silva from the Director General for Maritime Policy of Portugal, also on a national perspective.
Thank you so much. I will present the national special planning in Portugal, building a sustainable blue economy. So I want to start with a little bit of story. Portugal is a maritime country with a unique natural and cultural heritage. I also want to call your attention to some aspects. So Portugal's jurisdiction is more than half of the EU waters, member states' waters, and is one of the biggest exclusive economic zone in the world, have almost 4 million kilometers extended continental shelf and almost 1,000 kilometers of coastline in mainland. Another aspect is that Portugal presents a deep ocean with relevant natural resources. We have a long experience of planning of coastal zones. Portugal has established his maritime public domain in the 19th century. The coastal zone comprises a coastal strip that includes 500 meters from land and also extend to the sea up to the bathymetry of 30 meters. Between 1993 and 2014, coastal zone management plans covering the whole country, the coastline between Caminha, which is a city in the north of Portugal, and Vila Real de Santo António, which is a city in the south of Portugal. All these plans have been approved. So right now, the Portuguese Maritime Special Plan, corresponding to the subdivision of mainland, the subdivision of Madeira, and the subdivision of the extended continental shelf, has been approved and was published in December of 2019. The Maritime Special Plan for the Açores subdivision has not yet been approved due to administrative aspects, but is expected to be approved in the next months, in the coming months. The Maritime Special Plan, let me pass to another slide, yeah. So, the good practice for a maritime spatial planning are reflected in the volumes of the plan report. Portugal adopted a model for the permanent updating of the maritime space planning, safeguarding environment change, and favoring multi-use, as you can see on the table. A website and a geoportal have been created with all this information. And regarding the Portuguese maritime special planning, and also to support the elaboration of the situation plan on the under public consultation. So I want to highlight that Portugal played a key role in the inclusion of an objective, exclusive, dedicated to the conservation of the ocean in the Agenda 2030, the SDG 14. Since this approval, it is committed to contribute activity to this implementation. On the other hand, Portugal has published the first national ocean strategy in 2006. The second one was published in 2014, and now we have the third strategy published right now in 2001. So on the basis of our experience, the development of sustainable blue economy must be based on healthy ecosystems and the protection of coastal communities. And this is not an easy exercise. Promote compatibilities between competitive use or activities with a view to contribute to a better economic use of the marine environment and reduce the impact of human activities of the marine environmental is critical. Maritime special plans is a step on the way to promote the sustainable use of the oceans and marine resource, a step through a sustainable bioeconomy. We believe on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marisa, for your very well-timed presentation. Two comments. One is about the extent of the waters under Portugal's jurisdiction. You said that this is the biggest, they are the biggest area in the European Union. I think this is debatable. I think another member state may have another view on this. And then I saw one of your slides, and this is very important. You presented this national strategy, national maritime strategy, and I think Portugal is an excellent example of how maritime spatial planning is integrated, is part of a broader vision for the ocean, for the maritime domain. So thank you very much for this. So we travel south, even more south, very, very south now. And now we have as a speaker Jane Turpie from the University of Cape Town, talking about poverty and gender considerations. So Jane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here because the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, or SWAM, approached the Environment for Development for help with developing a framework for including poverty and gender dimensions in marine spatial planning. This work was also supported by IOC, UNESCO, and the FAO, and also some of the local institutions in the countries in which we did some pilot testing. So MSP provides an opportunity, well, the main purpose, I guess, is to bring about sustainable development of the oceans for the benefit of society as a whole. However, in practice, it has been criticized for a lack of inclusivity, for a notable gender bias, and for favoring stakeholders that are resource strong and influential. So this is enormously risky to the ultimate success of MSP. If you don't bring stakeholders along in an appropriate manner, expressing their values and concerns in ways that they trust, then it could undermine the whole process. So as we've heard yesterday, the long-term success of MSP hinges on all three pillars of sustainability: environmental, economic, and social. So far, social sustainability has been the least considered element in MSP. Socioeconomic data are often lacking in the process. We've seen this many times, and it's said to be partly because of the scarcity of those data, but also because of the costs of collecting them. But we would argue that actually this is quite an important investment to make in MSP. So social sustainability requires consideration of three things, really: the recognition of the diversity of people and their values and indigenous knowledge systems in relation to different marine environments. The second being representation of stakeholders, considering how marginalized stakeholders in particular might be affected by changes to the status quo, as well as having their participation. And thirdly, consideration of the distribution of risks and benefits among the different stakeholder groups involved in the process. So these need to be incorporated into MSP along with appropriate tools and metrics so that we can analyze what we're potentially planning for. So as part of our exercise, we came up with a checklist, which could be ultimately elements of a scorecard, where we looked at how marginalized groups might be incorporated into different stages and steps of MSP. And without going into too much detail, it basically requires that baseline studies need to identify marginalized groups and describe their situation as relevant to MSP. That government needs to set non-negotiables in terms of international goals and targets, that the analysis of potential future development scenarios need to consider the impacts on marginalized groups at appropriate spatial scales, and representatives of those groups should participate in the process. And finally, the outcome should not be regressive in terms of poverty, gender equality, or for that matter, intergenerational societal well-being in general. So a comprehensive MSP process would ideally involve estimating changes in the economy, in ecosystem health or biodiversity, and in societal well-being under alternative future scenarios. And these impacts would be measured in terms of a number of criteria for which metrics would need to be developed. Since metrics so these metrics would be used to describe the baseline. They'd be useful for the scenario analysis, but they'd also be very useful in the monitoring of the outcomes of MSP. So two important criteria in this would be the levels of poverty and gender equality. And the question that was posed was, well, how do we measure these? So poverty is often measured in terms of income or some proxy thereof, but it can also be considered in terms of several dimensions as per the CEDA's multidimensional poverty analysis framework. So this encourages us to think about poverty not only in terms of resources, but also opportunity and choice, power and voice, and security. This CEDA framework was what we used as a basis for our measurements of poverty, but also provides a good basis for describing gender equality, as we can describe this situation for women in similar terms. So we developed criteria and a scoring system for each of these 4 dimensions. And then we developed a set of social survey instruments, focus group discussions, key informant interviews, and household questionnaires to try and measure it. The questionnaires covered information about the households and sources of income and where that came from, but also had a lot of questions relating to the other dimensions of poverty, opportunity, voice, and security. And we also included questions about preferences and values relating to the marine environment and its planning and management. And then we tested that methodology in Kenya, Tanzania, and Madagascar, just in sections of the coast, surveying about 1,500 households in total. What we found was that, if you look at the bottom left graph, more than half of the households in those study areas within 10 kilometers of the coast were resource poor. Very different situation from what we've been hearing about in Europe. And also that the households are all highly reliant on fisheries, although they do all engage in multiple livelihood sources.
Sorry, Jane, can I ask you to...
Okay, moving on. But main thing is that income varied more than other variables and was very related to the kinds of development along the coast, whereas the other dimensions were more consistent across different countries, suggesting that those are related to broader systemic or policy issues. So in conclusion, socioeconomic data collection, we think, is essential for MSP in developing countries. It's not that expensive, but obviously it needs to be very well informed with preparatory information gathering. But it's good in that it's going to be repeatable, which will be good for monitoring outcomes. So scaling up data collection will allow development of good predictive models, we hope, that will help with decision support tools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jane, for this presentation on this very interesting subject. So we have impressive tools to assess the environmental impact of maritime spatial planning, but what about the social impacts? That's something, social economic impacts. In developed countries, we have safety nets, social safety nets, which may help diminish or reduce the impact of maritime spatial plans on populations, but in developing countries, this may be it's not a big issue. So we enter now the question time. Oh, sorry. Oh, what a shame. Sorry, excuse me. I am really sorry for that. Now, because we were going south, but we now go east a little bit. So to Malaysia, we go back to the northern hemisphere, I would say. So it's our next speaker is Nurfatim Wahida Puspa. I hope I pronounced correctly, and She works at the Maritime Institute of Malaysia, and she will also present the national perspective in that country. Thank you, and apologies again.
A very good afternoon to all, and thank you, co-moderator, for the brief introduction, and thank you for having me here. So before I start, if I may deliver my speech with my mask on. Okay. So today, my intervention in MSP and its link to sustainable ocean economies would be on Malaysia's pilot MSP project, the Tun Mustafa Park in Sempurna, Sabah. So, Malaysia has had a few successful stories of MSP. So as a developing maritime nation, bordering Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines, Malaysia has 3 of the world's most productive coastal habitat that support coastal fishing communities. To date, Malaysia has around 51 marine parks established using zoning plan and MSP. So, good development starts with a good planning. So in this case, Tun Mustafa Park Sempurna, as a case study, is a great example of MSP in Malaysia. So Tun Mustafa Park, or TMP, is located in the northern part of the Malaysian state of Sabah. It covers a marine area for almost 900,000 hectares, making it the largest marine park in Malaysia, a hugely important area for conservation. So the area's socio-economic importance also cannot be overstated, with more than 80,000 people supported by its fishing ground, which collectively produce hundreds of tons of fish per day. So, however, the area was seriously threatened by overfishing, destructive fishing practices, and pollution. So why MSP is important in Tun Mustafa Park? The establishment of Tun Mustafa Park actually started in 2003 with 3 main objectives in mind. Is to conserve the marine biodiversity, to alleviate the poverty level of coastal communities, and to enable the sustainable development of fisheries activity within the area. During the long process of the gazettement of TMP, a committee was then established to guide the development of an integrated management plan which involved multi-stakeholders representing the region's best interests, again, working towards the conservation of marine biodiversity and achieving sustainable ocean economics. So the gazettement of Tun Mustafa Park actually took Malaysia around 13 years of consultation and engagement with those related parties. So as mentioned earlier, the socio-economic input of Tun Mustafa Park and the main objective are interrelated, which bring us to the priority zones of Tun Mustafa Park, where the concept for the park is to be a multi-use managed area, which includes area for street protection, tourism, artisanal fishing, and commercial fishing, among others. So sectors and activities involved in TMP include fisheries, tourism, and maritime transportation. All of these activities were under the established sectors of blue economy in Malaysia. So MSP bring together different stakeholders and enables them to jointly make thoughtful decisions about how to allocate space among these competing economic activities while protecting marine ecosystem. So moving on to the challenges and lessons learned from this MSP project, Malaysia gathered that the lack of coastal and land interaction proved to be a hindrance to a more robust management plan, and inadequate funding proved to be a limiting step in to further the development of the park. The approaches conducted in this MSP project, which involved multi-stakeholder consultation, participatory engagement, and integrated ocean management contribute to the success of the gazettement of the park, where stakeholders' commitment played a vital role in ensuring the main objective of the park were met. So this is an example of the participatory engagement with the local community. So to conclude, the ocean sector is crucial to Malaysia's economy through its resources and other ecosystem services that support its trades and industries, as well as it requires proper management and conservation strategies to achieve maximum economic, environmental, and social outcome. Cooperation from all stakeholders is needed to ensure that MSP meets its objective and the approaches identified and taken have to consider the human-environment interaction. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nur Fatin, for this presentation. And here in Europe, everything is much smaller and much easier. So I think we are humbled by the work that is being done in your part of the world because of the large marine areas and the many issues to be addressed. I don't resist the temptation before starting the session to read something which may inspire us. I have been feeling very cheerleaded lately, and what I want to write about today is the sea. It contains so many colors: silver at dawn, green at noon, dark blue in the evening. Sometimes it looks almost red, or it will turn the color of old coins. This is from a novel called All the Light We Cannot See from Anthony Doerr, written in 2014. I think this helps us to set the scene for the discussion. So I will ask first question to Marisa, Nur Fatin, Bente. And the question is, many countries have signed up to international agreements for sustainable use of the ocean to move from the business-as-usual approach. But what are the key challenges of transitioning from blue growth, we mentioned this before, to sustainable blue economy for your country or sector? So who wants to start?
I can be the first one. Thank you. As I mentioned in my presentation, Portugal has a long experience in the spatial planning. And we also already implemented 3 national strategies, ocean strategies. And I want to highlight that this last strategy is like a main referential for all the public policies that we are going to implement in Portugal for the next 10 years. And for us, it's important to put the health of the ocean in the basis of the development of new technologies, the science, and also the center of the decision making. Our strategy is based on 10 specific goals that going from the decarbonization, food security, bioeconomy, circular economy, health, well-being, 10. And then we have 13 intervention areas. And all the strategic goals are interconnected with the 13 intervention areas. I also would like to add that right now we are planning some activities, and all our investments are related with the main European policy for sustainability, like example, offshore renewable energies, green transition, and the European Green Deal, the sustainable ocean aquaculture, food security, blue tourism, sustainable practice, and also green shipping moving from Fit for 55. And the definition of this special location is defined between all the national authorities and the public bodies like Portuguesation Environment, Biodiversity Authority, Ports Administration. And we need to bring all stakeholders to the dialogue to engage them and to achieve the results that we pretend regarding a sustainable blue economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Marisa. Sonur Fatim or Bente, any views on this transition from growth to a sustainable, I would say, blue economy?
Hello. So transitioning into sustainable blue economy has always resonated with Malaysia's development plans. I believe along the way, Malaysia has encountered various challenges towards achieving the sustainable blue economy. So preferably in Malaysia, we currently don't have any, I would say, policy papers or framework regulation on the MSP itself. But however, we are currently developing our national blueprint on the blue economy. So as a developing maritime nation, we focus solely on the aspect of fisheries. So I believe managing sustainable fisheries is the key challenges in transitioning into the sustainable blue economy. Because in the case of Tun Mustafa Park, as I mentioned earlier, managing, because the area is so big that almost 85,000 people depending on its coastal economic value, and where I would say the management of the park itself is finding it difficult to manage the fisheries resources sustainably. So in this case, they actually meet with the local communities and explain and educate them about the status of the fisheries resources in the area. So I believe that managing fisheries is a key challenges, but however, we could educate the local communities on how to sustain their fisheries resources. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Nur Fatim. Bente, perhaps briefly, what is your take on this? From your perspective, working in this, I would say, organization which is very knowledgeable in terms of sectors, some maritime sectors, blue growth to sustainable economy. Yeah, I mean, my question is, I will repeat perhaps the last part of the question. What are the key challenges of transitioning from blue growth to a sustainable blue economy for your country or for your sector?
Have a very good sort of starting point when it comes to marine spatial planning, because with sort of 20 years of a tradition of integrated and comprehensive ocean management plans that already take into account quite a lot of coordination, cooperation between different sectors and comprehensive monitoring programs and so on. But we are now at, I would say, an important stage where Norway has a very ambitious plan of growing its offshore wind production. And as I mentioned in my first intervention, we do see a significant pressure developing in the North Sea. So Norway has ambitions of 30 gigawatt production from offshore wind by 2040 on the Norwegian continental shelf. So what is very important now as we move forward is, and the government has also said that they will start developing more comprehensive business plans in order to actually be able to accommodate this growth in offshore wind. And with these business plans, they need to come with clear principle for the total area use. They need to have some predictable regulatory frameworks when it comes to, what are the expectations in terms of coexistence? What are the expectations in terms of nature inclusive design and so on? And I believe the private sector needs are sort of firmer guidelines or expectations on these parts. The other thing I wanted to mention is, moving forward now, it's extremely important with inclusive stakeholder dialogues, which has been mentioned by many. and for collaboration. But in order for collaboration to be successful, it's very important with trust among each of the stakeholders. We need trust in terms of the scientific basis and the knowledge basis, and we need trust between the stakeholders. And when it comes to the knowledge basis, I just want to also highlight the extremely important decade that we are in now in terms of the decade of ocean science, in getting that knowledge base on the table.
Okay, thanks, Bente. Okay, we have another question, and this is for Nathalie. Only. Yes. What institutional mechanisms have been established in your country to address the challenges of the sustainable blue economy? I think in the Netherlands you have this mechanism to design this North Sea program, and so yeah, please, Nathalie.
Thank you. Actually, we have. I was just counting a little bit. What we have the political agreements, the North Sea agreement, and we are taking decisions based on consensus with NGOs, entrepreneurs, and also the policymakers. Then we have the maritime spatial planning, where we have included the sustainable blue economy, aligned with your approach, sustainable blue economy approach of DG Mare. And what we also have is actually the Committee of Practice North Sea, with all the stakeholders, small or big entrepreneurs that they really want to combine different multi-use aspects and also scale up together. And this is a community where we work together to develop within, but also on the whole EEZ of the North Sea. And finally, we have the European Maritime Spatial Planning, as I mentioned, with the North Sea and Baltic Sea countries, that we are collaborating together on innovations.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. And then we have a third question, and this is for Audun and for Jane. I will start with Audun. What are the opportunities for supporting countries and advancing a sustainable blue economy in the next decade? Audun.
Thank you. Well, I mentioned already our vision for transformative aquatic food systems in our blue the blue growth and the blue transformation initiative. And of course, we have available resources for all our members in all the pillars of the blue transformation vision, both on aquaculture issues, on capture fisheries, and on value chains. On aquaculture, for example, we will present to our members in March next year a draft guidance for sustainable aquaculture, which will help countries expand their aquaculture sectors, but in a sustainable way, based in science and best practice. But if there's one element I'd like to mention, that is the support from FAO to members in the implementation of the new WTO fisheries subsidy agreement, where there is a role foreseen for FAO in helping countries to collect data, to analyze data, to report on data related to the state of stock, so the resources in all over the world. And also, maybe even more important, how to help countries manage their fishery sustainably, to allow them to grow and to get more value out of the resources they have in a sustainable manner. So I think those factors are the most important ones. So in aquaculture and capture fisheries and upgrading in value chains. In value chains, we have a number of large projects, including on blue ports. We have a very large project financed by the EU and by Germany on fish for ACP in 12 different value chains in 12 different value chain countries in the ACP. So we have a number of resources and projects and programs. But if there's one single thing I'd like to highlight, in addition to aquaculture, it's our support to the implementation of the WTO fisheries subsidy agreement. and of course also in helping them to reduce overcapacity and overfishing in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Audun. And then now, Jane, what are your views on this?
Thank you. Yeah, I see data as being a very important angle in which countries can be supported, particularly developing countries. There's a scarcity of data there, but there's also sometimes difficulty of accessing existing data, especially government data. So somehow we need to have systems where data can be made available and collected systematically. And this is not only social data, but data pertaining to, which is a related issue, the value of ecosystem services. So I would carry on supporting the development of methods for incorporating social data into the MSP process, but working further with experimental methods and scaling up to see how we can develop models and decision support tools, including incorporation of those data into spatial tools, like we see the Symphony tool being developed for marine impacts. I think that can be extended to social impacts. Yeah, then the other thing is that in Africa, a lot of the, I suppose, MSP will be promoting better governance of inshore resources where a lot of development needs to be done. And that's going to come at costs to immediate short-term costs to societies that depend on those resources. So we need to try and find ways of neutralizing that, if you like. It shouldn't just be assumed that if you're developing industrial sectors that the jobs created will be accessible or available to the people that are losing out. So, you know, it was mentioned yesterday, payments for ecosystem services, but we need to find ways to come out with no negative impacts. Then I also think we should be capitalizing, and it hasn't been mentioned here either, on the global trend towards natural capital accounting. A lot of developing countries are getting on board with this now and are embarking on ecosystem accounting, which includes marine ecosystems. There's a lot of overlap in the data needs and the data collection methods, and I'm sure that there could be some good synergies there. And in fact, that whole process is also about supporting sustainable development. And then finally, as you opened with, I think we need to recognize that we are reaching the limits in terms of economic growth, and we need to start thinking very seriously about distributional issues rather than just growth to solve our societal problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Apologies, Spiros, I have been beaten by Kronos. So, okay.
Well, as long as the discussion is so good, I don't think anybody needs to apologize. I'm really happy to be able to bring to the discussion some of the questions that we have from the public and the audience, but I think that it was time well used, so no need to apologize one. Okay, what we have decided, we had a very democratic discussion with the organizers, and then I decided that we will not be seeing the questions up here. What we will do is, because we can combine questions together instead of just having you look at one thing and then answer another, I'll just read out a couple of things and address questions to you. So what we have is, one first question is, whether you know of examples of your own country or other countries that have updated regulations on the regulatory way to deal with multiple uses in the ocean. So how we can, from a regulatory point of view, go beyond the obstacle of having to combine all the different uses and to make it even worse. We have another question saying that we have the uses that are the existing, let's say, technologies, uses, blue economy sectors, but we also have the emerging ones. So biotechnology, for example, alternative food sources and everything. How can we combine all of this in a regulatory way to properly do the maritime spatial planning? I'm not looking at any one of you specifically, but we can start from Natalie.
Thank you. It's a challenge because we have a lot of regulations, and if you ask an entrepreneur who would like, for example, passive fishery within wind parks, windmills, wind farms, it's very difficult to start there. So what we have to do is to adapt the policy. That's what we are doing at the moment. The technique for passive fishery, we are researching on that and how we have to make adaptation of the regulation. And what we're also trying to do is when you're scaling up within, for example, a wind park, is that we would like to have a look about overarching permits that the entrepreneurs does not have to have a big scale of permits, but we can discuss with the different governments to give one permit to get into like a marine park we are developing at the moment. But it's really a challenge. In the Netherlands, we are 4 ministries that are responsible for the policy, so we are really discussing together how to make it more feasible also for the entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Do we have somebody else from here, or I don't know, Marisa? No. Maybe Bente, you would like to comment on that from your experience being in the private side of developing uses for the maritime space?
Yeah, very shortly, I think the last response was very good, overarching permits. I think that one of our challenges is basically relating to many different regulatory bodies that do not actually speak together. So it needs this thing about overarching and predictable, I think, is extremely important.
Thank you very much. Then let's move a little bit to the overseas wind farms and wind energy development. And I have 2 questions. One is actually towards both Natalie and Bente, saying that there are plans for amendment of safety and other regulations of wind farms, and how this can be combined with regulations for fisheries, so that these can be effectively combined, and so we turn conflicting use to a synergy. And there is a second question of which I'm not sure I understand perfectly, but the question is, it is clear that solid growth is expected in the blue economy, and whether there is, let me find the wording, whether there is, this is related to insurance, and if this aspect is discussed or negotiated. I don't know if insurance means insurance or safety in this question. So. Yeah, it was addressed to you actually, and to Bente. Okay. Yes, yeah.
Or Bente first. I can start if you want. Yeah, actually, this is the discussion we have at the moment in the Netherlands, that we want to be good neighbors to the wind operators when we are starting to scale up with multi-use within wind parks. And so we are really thinking about public-private governance, how we can be a good neighbor with regard to safety, how with regard to infrastructure we have to build together, but also how we can create nature restoration, because I know that the wind operators are really willing and working on nature inclusive windmills, and that's where we can also have a look about synergies, how to work together. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And back to you, Bente. Do you have any comment on this question?
Well, in terms of both investments and insurance, how can we incentivize the good guys? Premiums that actually reward certain acts of with the responsible developments and so on. I think it's extremely important. So I don't know if the question was only insurance, or if you were actually talking about responsible investments and as well.
Yeah, I think it's 2 different questions. So I think we have covered as much as possible. But now let's go to one that I think addresses everyone. It's very simple, but it's not a simple question. How do you define the carrying capacity of the sea as you're developing, the different uses and everything? It's easy to ask, difficult to answer. But I think that as we're trying to approach the issue of multiple uses and sustainable spatial planning and development, we need to have at least a common language in what we mean by saying carrying capacity. So would anyone like to approach this? And that includes all of you, including also you, Odin, since you are working on a specific sector.
Well, I don't know if there is a specific answer to this. Certainly, whatever is done has to be done with the full involvement of all the stakeholders, which has been said many times. For example, for us in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, we're already struggling a lot by making visible the many millions of small-scale and artisanal operators in our sector that very often are outside the formal economy. So for us, the question, of course, is not only the fisheries and aquaculture sector to be integrated in a larger whole, but also to make sure that everyone who is involved in fisheries and aquaculture are already defined as being within the formal sector of fisheries and aquaculture. And especially, as you know, this year, 2022, is the International Year for Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. So we also highlight, therefore, again, the hundreds of millions of people all over the world that depend on fisheries and aquaculture for their livelihoods. Now, talking about carrying capacity, I've mentioned already that we have to grow the production in aquaculture and fisheries in order just to stabilize the production per capita with a growing population. But so certainly the potential for further growth, both in aquaculture and capture fisheries in terms of volumes and value is very large. But of course, it has to be done in the right way, also together with the other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comment on the carrying capacity from anyone here? Yes, Jane, please.
I would say it's the level of use which decreases the real value of the system over time, taking all values to society into account. Or you could also look at it as the level that maximizes the asset value of the system over the long term.
That's a pretty interesting definition. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. Coming to the marine protected areas, I have a question that I see as an interesting one. Do you see the multiple uses and multi-use of the ocean and the seas as a chance to reduce anthropogenic stressors in marine protected areas? So how introducing more uses we can actually reduce? I see that Nurfatin is moving around in her chair, so she wants to take maybe this question.
So the question is about MPA, marine protected areas, and how the zoning plan actually work to sustain the resources itself, is it?
Yes.
Okay, so in my opinion, so I believe that the zoning actually works in terms of, so we, in Malaysian context, we actually have 4 different zoning plan that actually we have no-take zone as the conservation area, and we have another zone actually only for tourism, commercial activities, and another zone for fisheries, and then another zone for coastal activities, which is such as artisanal fisheries. So I believe that the zoning work when I would say the MSP itself, we sort of like communicate the idea to the local communities, and we give them sort of like participatory engagement on what are the status of the resources and what benefit does zoning actually prove to be resource sustainably. And also we did we actually have a capacity building program with the local community itself in the in the Tun Mustafa Park. So yeah, I believe that the zoning plan actually works in TMP to achieve much more sustainable resources. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I will turn with the same kind of question also to Marisa. I said in a previous session that our institute developed together with Forum Oceano and the government, the regional government of Madeira, a plan to assess the economic and socio-economic value of the Salvagen Islands. And what we saw in this case was that by reducing human pressure, we were increasing, for example, the carbon capture capacity, which was increasing the economic value hugely of the islands. So, I mean, in your view as DGPM for Portugal, how do you see this kind of exchange of value, if you like, reducing human pressure to increase overall the performance of a marine protected area?
Thank you so much. I think this is very important. The creation of these areas are very important to the blue economy also. We have an example of, it's not related with the protect marine, areas marine, but we have an example of the floating renewable energy, the wind float, a very important project, a pilot project with the floating wind offshore production. And what we saw was that the biodiversity increase in that area. So it's important to create some balance of the use and to have more production and more the blue carbon also. It's important to have in the balance or in the equation on the decision that we make to decide what kind of use.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I should stop now, but I have one question that I want to address because I find it very interesting. It says that we usually talk about gender equity and social development in terms of maritime spatial planning, mostly in developing countries, but actually, how much do we actually need to take this account in the global north in terms of how we include gender equity and social development as an objective of maritime spatial planning? And I would look into some representatives of the global north, again, Natalie or Pente, because we're talking of countries that are leaders in the sense of, developing MSP. And I promise that will be the last question.
Genders, equality. Bente, would you like to start? No.
You're both ladies. Come on. One of you has to start.
Okay.
You're doing that in practice.
It's very important. But also, if we have a look at here, the panel, more than 60%, 70%? Yeah. No, it's equal. So I'm really very happy with that. No, actually, we take that into account also within our ministries, NGOs, other stakeholders. It's very important. And also, it's really, if you have a look at about our North Sea agreements, the chair is a lady, and we are really very happy with her. But we also would be very happy with a man. Okay. So both is very good.
Okay, so it's all good. Bente, would you like to add something to that?
Diversity is also much more than gender, of course. So I think it's extremely important to bring the young with us into the decision making, because they are the future. And I think also that in Norway you also have communities far up north where fisheries, for example, is an extremely important part of their culture and so on. So we need to have the breadth and the diversity throughout. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good point, and fisheries is definitely one good example. Okay, enough with me. I think that now we should give the floor to our rapporteur, Anne Turkmen, who will try to brief up and make some summary of everything that was discussed in this. And please take the floor.
Thank you, Spiros. I would like to thank all speakers for the inspiring presentations. And with such a generic topic like sustainable blue economy, these presentations included almost all aspects of MSP concept, which we had been discussing in the last 2 days, from the knowledge gaps to capacity development and awareness, and from transboundary cooperation to climate-smart planning, protection and restoration of marine environments. The presentations also highlighted the importance of ecosystem-based approach and adaptive management strategies. Besides the economical sustainability, social sustainability is also of crucial importance. Therefore, it is necessary to enable a high level of inclusivity involving all stakeholders in MSP processes, integrated with the ecosystem-based approach. We saw very good examples and case studies of this integration, engaging a great diversity of stakeholders from all sectors, such as fisheries and aquaculture, food production, maritime transportation, energy, mining, and tourism from different regions of the world. Cooperation among stakeholders and coordination within and between marine regions are important. This can be achieved by a transdisciplinary process, bringing together decision makers, scientists, civil society representatives, and all actors of diverse marine regions. New modes of co-creative cooperation between ocean actors should be developed in order to be able to overcome the challenges and move beyond the current sectoral gaps. We need a sustainable blue recovery that supports synergies with livelihoods and the marine environment. We must consider the ocean as a lifeline that should be preserved and restored to support socioeconomic resilience. Thank you.
That was a maestro strike. I mean, you managed to put everything together in less than 3 minutes, I think. So thank you very much, Ant. And with this, let's first give a hand to Juan, Ant, and all the speakers, remote and here. Thank you very much. And this concludes the 8th session of this international conference. So now we will go to the coffee break, and then we'll be back here at 4 o'clock exactly for the final session, which is session number 9 on international MSP initiatives, which will be followed up also by the closing statements. So let's see each other again at 4 o'clock here. Thank you very much, and congratulations.